And you're going to hear a lot from Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent. He seems to be the master of ceremonies on all of them. But I think that, well, either Mark Stein and or Keith Mortimer, our town engineering staff, will be involved in this too. So I'm going to hand the baton to Pat Stevens. He's going to do a presentation on the stormwater management plan, which is very timely considering what we had happen last month.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Yeah, it's definitely when this program gets seen the most, and you touched on it, Mark and Keith are playing a big role in this program now, assisting me. I am still officially the coordinator, but a lot of the heavy lifting in the day-to-day is handled by them and jointly with us. So trying to stay on track here. There's going to be a lot of me talking tonight, so I apologize in advance. So the first presentation we're doing is on our MS4 program. So the town of Webster is a MS4, so we're required to operate as a municipal, operate our own municipal separate stormwater system, which is what MS4 stands for. We basically manage a stormwater management program, or a SWAM. There's various different requirements. Earlier this year in January, a new permit got adopted. So we're moving through the early stages in the first process of updating our past practices and program to match those requirements. So that's been a extra lift this year, which is why I'm really glad that we have Mark and Keith on staff to work through it. I'm not sure I'd get through it on my own, probably wouldn't. So it's really a lot of the same items, but updating them, some new requirements and things of that nature about the program, some additional reporting requirements and things like that. We're getting very familiar very quickly though, because as many of you know, we did have an EPA audit a little while ago where they came in to specifically look at this program, the compliance and the practices that we have with it. I was quite pleased with the program that we had in place and the progress we've made toward the new permit. So I think most of that went pretty well. But so that's the SWIP program. The major components of the program are permits and coverage. There's special conditions. There's the swamp requirements that I just mentioned, the stormwater management program, record keeping and reporting and evaluation is a big part, and then the 6 minimum control methods. The other component to it, we have one of the key sections is permit authorization. So the town of Webster, as an MS4, authorizes permits for various developments and activities throughout the town in compliance with the general permit. It's referenced there, which helps control the stormwater runoff. So we mentioned the heavy rainfall the other day. These facilities and the program is designed to control as much of that runoff created through development in a responsible manner so that we don't degrade our waterways or cause any additional flooding. Much like we saw last week. So the town of Webster is an operator. We have traditional land use control. We must follow the outline in part 1 of the general permit. The town is exempt from the part 7 of the permit based on the way it's currently written. We do not have any TMDL impaired waterways at this time. Special conditions, so there are some impaired waterways within the town of Webster that do fall under the special conditions section where they need special review and sometimes additional BMPs and practices that need to be put in place. There's minor trips to Arundequoit Bay, the Rochester Deep Bayment. Those are the 2 main waterways that are currently identified. Both on the west side of town and have to do with the bay and runoff there. So the swamp, the overall program requirements, the sections of that are a section of implementation and that staffing plan. So that has actually helped a lot internally. For a little while there was only 1 or 2 staff working on it. Now we have several to do some of the checking and reviewing of the plans to make sure we stay in compliance with this program. We have to make sure that the program that we have is available to the public. It's currently on our website in a few different places. It has to incorporate the minimum control measures. There's a mapping component, which we utilize our GIS program for that. That is available at Town Hall. If you go there, we're able to assist you with viewing the different mapping and controls that we have for our stormwater ponds, features, drainage ways, things of that nature. That is ever evolving. That's an area where we do have some work to do as far as tailoring some of the features that we have mapped specifically to this program so that they match up with what the program is looking for a little more clearly. Right now we just have a lot of data on a lot of different infrastructure, and it needs to be labeled a little bit better and organized, but it is in there. There needs to be a section on our legal authority as it ties to our code and our ability to enforce, which is the next section, enforcement measures and tracking. So we have to keep track of active construction sites as well as post-construction monitoring. Maria has had a big hand in reaching out to our privately owned post-construction stormwater facilities and getting annual permits for those. All new developments end up with an agreement directly with the town that they will maintain their facilities, which are typically ponds, infiltration basins, things like that, to the state standard, which is a nice clean way to do it. And they submit annual reports on that to track it. Internally, we're still monitoring right around 120 publicly owned ponds in various different developments that get usually annual inspections and are on a mowing schedule for maintenance, and then we're able to do some more sizable projects, desilting, vegetation removal on several each year as well, based on need. If they're in good condition, we don't spend time working on them, but in general, many do need some more work, and we continue to try to take on more and more of that work to get them in better condition. We have a record keeping and reporting and evaluation component. All the records we have, inspections and things of that nature need to be kept for 5 years. They are available to the public. An annual report is filed electronically every year. Then we keep a interim progress report on hand twice a year. The swamp must be reevaluated every 5 years. There's definitely sections and times when we see things in the field, we see situations that happen, and there definitely does call sometimes for an adjustment on how we look at things, which things we look at, and how thoroughly we look at them. So it is sort of ever evolving, making sure we're learning from the situations that come up and implementing them into our overall program to make it as effective as possible to eliminate deficiencies. And then basically document all of those statuses and requirements. So I mentioned the 6 minimum control measures. They are education and outreach. This is the first one, public involvement and participation. So those two kind of fall into what we're doing right now. Trying to get out in our public forums the best we can to communicate this information to the public, let them know that it's available, put these presentations online so they can be pulled down later, and sort of do as much outreach as we can. There's a lot of stuff we're connected with the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition, and they do a lot of effort on that front as well. They do a lot of advertising, posting things in public places, innovative field, all over the place, just to try to get some awareness out about this. That's the public component. Minimum measure 3 is illicit discharge, detection and elimination. So that's if we have sediment-laden water or any other kind of discharges that are not supposed to be going into our water, that we have a way to identify those, allow the public to clearly communicate those to us in a fast, efficient way. Primarily right now, most of the stormwater-related discharge items are coming through the highway department. We do have a 24-hour answering service, and we do perform the drainage maintenance on all of our own ponds. So if you do have a question about that, right now the most efficient way is to contact the highway department. We will come out and take a look at the situation that you're concerned about, and hopefully get you an answer on whether there is action to be taken, or better clarification of what you're seeing and what you're dealing with. We are doing a lot of that right now. There's a big concern in town because of the water levels that rose the other day during the nearly 6 inches of rain that fell in a short period of time. So we've been out looking at a lot of different situations, and there are times when there is something to be adjusted and addressed, and sometimes with the level of storm we had, it was just high water, and everything actually worked the way it should. It was just extremely high. So we're seeing a little bit of both right now, but definitely call if you have questions. Then we have the minimum measure for construction site stormwater runoff control. That's one that is dealt with daily for us. We have roughly 17 active construction sites right now that have active permits around town, ranging from subdivisions to large commercial sites. We get weekly, sometimes twice weekly reporting on those. We review those situations and make sure that any of the issues are being addressed so that when we do have a large rain event, we don't have discharges of sediment or anything else from these sites. So that's one we deal with every day. Then we have the post-construction stormwater management. We kind of touched on that before, that we reach out to privately owned parties to get annual reports, and then we do our own internal reporting on the ones we have. Those are primarily the existing ponds, infiltration basins, some green infrastructure here and there in town that we track and manage. And then minimum measure 6 is pollutant prevention and good housekeeping. So that comes in at our facilities, making sure our facilities are doing what they need to do. Building drains are going to the sewer, not to the storm. We're doing anything we can to have our own stormwater facilities for our impervious surfaces, and maintaining them the way we're supposed to. So that's number 6. That's right, I forgot to have them all broken down. I did them all right there today. So this is going to kind of be a repeat of what I said, but a little bit more elaboration. Part of the public outreach through the Stormwater Coalition that I mentioned, they do newspaper, radio, storm drain markers. They have a campaign for H2O Hero, which is their sort of mascot symbol that they put out there to try to get information out annually. And they also put out pamphlets, public involvement, leaf pickup, obviously something that we've already started to get calls about here, as a few of the leaves have started to fall. We usually don't start those operations till closer to Halloween, but that program is where we're picking up leaves and recycling them instead of having them in the drains and in the waterways of the town. We do pharmaceutical collection. We do household hazardous waste drop-off, which actually just happened in Penfield, where we assisted a couple weeks ago, maybe even last weekend. Then we have the e-waste drop-offs. Minimum measure 3, the illicit discharge. Like I said, we enforce a section of our code that gives us legal authority to do so. We put out information on how to identify them, how to eliminate them, and then we make sure that we're keeping a reporting up on any situations like that. Construction sites, as I said, we have several active sites in town where we monitor pretty much all aspects, keep an inventory, and do inspections. The post-construction, there's public and private. We do the inventories, we make sure they're maintained. The pollutant prevention and housekeeping minimizes exposure, reacts to spills. We have our standard operating procedures that we follow to make sure stuff like street sweeping falls into that good housekeeping section as well, which we are doing constantly. That's the majority of the information on our MS4 program. So questions? And here's the email, as I mentioned, to contact us with any other questions the public might have for us.
How much would all these cost? Do you have that?
The cost to manage the program?
Yeah, and also too, can I ask another question?
You can ask as many as you'd like to, it's correct.
Seeing that we hire a new, engineer in town and everything, so is there any way that we can cut back on outsourcing for engineer to cut down?
Absolutely, right. So with Keith coming on board and getting familiar, we've already decreased the outside use of engineers pretty dramatically. It's hard exactly to put numbers to, but we're primarily managing the program now, so I would say it's down already 80 to 90%. So we're already cutting in a big way to that outsourced program, which is big thanks to these guys right here for jumping right in and getting involved right away. So I know Keith has a more specific timeline for completely pretty much moving away, except for special projects. It's moving right along. We're making very good progress on that. Very happy with how they've stepped in. So that's definitely way down. We don't track the efforts on this specifically as far as town staff and things of that nature, but it's hefty. You know, the management of the MS4 program is kind of just bestowed upon us by the DEC, and same from them from the EPA at that level. And there isn't really any direct funding sources for it provided, and it's up to the townships to fund it. So we work it into our day-to-day, and it's covered in our operational budget, but it's not broken out. It kind of falls under our construction review for development and sort of the daily tasks that each staff member has is some of these items. So it's kind of hard to quantify exactly what the cost is, but it does take a lot of time.
And Pat, what I will say, and Charlie, I think it's the right term, if you go and look at what MS4 and what the DEC has come up with as far as regulations over the last 20 or 30 years, they almost all fall into what we call unfunded mandates, non-funded mandates from New York State. Is that what they're called, unfunded mandates? All right, everybody knows what those are? So, yeah, it is hard to really quantify state government DEC regulations that are somewhat, here you go, now you have to, well, I'm not going to be a repeat of what you just presented. We have to go and figure out how to execute those at our cost. You know, how would we do that? Whether it's staff or outsourced engineering firms like we were doing before Keith and Mark came on. All of that. And I know that's one of your fun topics, Charlie, unfunded mandate.
Yeah, this is, like you said, it's probably the last 20 years closer. The state and federal governments imposed not just regulations, but actually laws. We had to enact an entirely new chapter and put it into our code. So,
Yeah, and we're having to amend it as a part of this, you know, because of the changing
Right.
dates. The new permit does have more requirements. There's more to do there than there was previously. That kind of continues. Yeah.
and Webster, we have a little more work than the average.
You got it.
It's large.
It's,
Yeah, large.
it's more onerous on a town like Webster because
Absolutely.
what else can we call it? We're a wet town.
Right.
And that's the best description I can use for it, Denise. We're a wet town, and we found that out in spades last Monday night. What do we have, 6 inches of rain in 2 to 4 hours?
He was 5.7, but yeah.
Yeah. And the amazing thing is the drainage systems that we have in place handle it pretty darn well.
Yeah, we definitely saw water in places that we probably haven't in the last 3 or 4 decades, but it didn't stay there for a long period of time, and that is the system working.
But we could never build a system that's built to handle 6 inches of rain because it would cost $100 million plus for us.
We shouldn't, right? Because that's overkill for one day a year. You know, there's a balance in there, but to oversize things to that magnitude really
Right.
would be very detrimental financially to everything.
Johnny, anything?
No.
Well, this is going to sound like a broken record, but next up tonight is, believe it or not, Pat Stevens, the Superintendent of Highways, New York State ACT legislation. I'm sure we'll explain what that acronym is. Its effects on equipment purchasing for Webster and potential equipment purchasing amendments to implement. Back to you, Pat.
Yeah, kind of keeping a little bit in the same theme of legislation and things that have come up and are now affecting the town of Webster. So the ACT legislation is the Advanced Clean Truck legislation, which affects us because what you see there, a whole bunch of trucks. We have 24 full-size trucks right now. They can go out plowing on the road. Technically 6 of them are spares, and there's 18 frontline, but it's a very, very large fleet that will continue to grow with the town in the foreseeable future. So the Advanced Clean Truck Act is New York State legislation mandating that a certain percentage of truck manufacturers' sales be ZEVs, zero emission vehicles. And the truck manufacturers that we buy our large trucks from are primarily large truck manufacturers. They don't have a lot of variation in their product. There's some, but almost all of them are medium to large size trucks, which is what this legislation impacts. The legislation was originally developed in California. It was adopted in New York in 2021, and its first year of implementation is in 2025. The implementation for this program, it sets a requirement of a certain percentage of sales for each manufacturer in the state of New York each year, starting in 2025 and going to 2035. And in 2035, so the first year, the requirement is 11%. So we currently are buying Western Star brand plow trucks that come with the plows and the one-way that are about $305,000 a piece currently. Western Star is required to sell 11% zero emission vehicles in the state of New York this year in order to continue to sell the diesel trucks that are coming in. So if you break that down into smaller quantities, it would be 11 out of 100 vehicles sold have to be zero emission vehicles. There's quite a few issues with that that we'll kind of get into here a little bit as we move along. Then you see that the requirement by 2035 would be that 75% of the trucks that they sell in New York State would be zero emission vehicles. So where things currently stand with the manufacturers are that they don't have the sales to support this. So there's no major heavy duty truck manufacturer that currently has a zero emission vehicle that to fill enough to sell to fill the orders of the traditional heavy duty. So the diesel trucks that are needed for snow and ice removal can't be sold because there's not enough zero emission vehicle sales. A big part of this is that there's a tech gap. There is not currently a zero emission vehicle that is viable for snow and ice operations as we see it in the state of New York. It does not exist. Because of it's required to run for long hours with minimal breaks, and it has a hydraulic PTO equipment. There was an article that I read probably 6 months ago. It was actually forwarded by Monroe County that talked about New York City doing a trial run with this with their garbage trucks, which they also use to plow with in the winter. The trucks were viable for refuse pickup in the summertime. They'd run about 12 hours on charge. When they put them out for snow and ice removal, those same trucks, the same batteries, lasted 2 hours before they had to be recharged. So that's the technology part that isn't there. They're not able to go for the durations that we would need here.
What was the charging time for those? Was it in the article?
It might be in there, but I didn't remember the charging time. And the charging time comes down to your infrastructure.
Right.
Say I have 24 of these, to have 24 high-speed charging stations in a single facility is millions of dollars in infrastructure upgrade just so I can get the power. So that's another major component of this. Yeah. So there's currently not any short-term options. We've heard that some private truck manufacturers may basically go buy trucks in other states or register them in other states to try to work around this and complete the work that they need to do. We have got copies of several letters to the governor and the EPA from the New York State Automobiles Dealers Association, Trucking Association of New York, and American Truck Dealers Group, but really we haven't seen any movement to make any concessions or adjustments to this legislation right now. So the impact. Right now, our truck suppliers are telling us we cannot order the trucks that we need for 2025. The 2025 model, if I was to order the same truck that I need, because there's not an alternative, would come through with a title that states it cannot be initially registered in New York State or California. Right now they currently say California, but it will say it cannot be registered in New York State on the title for the vehicle.
Wow.
Our fleet of over 30 medium and heavy duty trucks, because of that, will essentially continue to age and become more costly to repair every year. We still have some trucks that are up 20 years old. We're getting closer. We've made great progress on that in the last few years, working with Paul Adams on the budget, but we still have trucks that are that old, and they start to have bigger and bigger issues, problems. The repairs are 10,000, 20,000 instead of 800 here or 1,000 there for typical maintenance. And then with the aging of the fleet comes the potential increase for breakdowns and a major snow event, which threatens our ability to serve the public and provide safe roadways. If our trucks are old and don't function properly, we would fall behind and have unsafe roads, which is pretty much our whole goal, is to avoid that at the department. It's the primary function. So things that, are kind of being done right now that expect change is a lot of coordination. Communicating the negative impacts to our state and local officials. Coordinating with other municipalities on strategies. I've already talked with a few different towns, the town of Gates, the town of Barrington. Some of them have already started to reach out with communication, come up with different strategies. Work with the New York State truck dealers. I know our dealers that we deal with are open to being creative and thinking outside the box in the short term. We just haven't came to any actual action plans yet. Haven't come up with the right combination. Obviously support the automotive and trucking organizations in their efforts to lobby for change. Work with Monroe County and the Highway Superintendents Association to lobby for change, which I'm a member of and we work with. It's a great group. I think we'll continue to start to push on this and work through it, and that's a lot of why I'm presenting this tonight, is to sort of start that movement, start that coordination, start the conversation about something about this needing to change in order for municipalities in New York to function. And then at some point, there could be the potential to pass resolutions related to the topic to strengthen the call for change. I don't know what those are yet, I don't have examples, but obviously might be something that is needed in order to solidify the situation and maybe make a change. So with those limitations and being told that we can't order some of the trucks that we had budgeted for and planned on, what I initially have started to do is look for in-stock items. So items that are already delivered now or will be 2024 model year that won't fall into this restriction, and therefore we can purchase them and register them the way we're supposed to. So for this year, I found one piece so far. It's a large piece of equipment, but we think it's going to have a major impact on our ability to do some of the maintenance that we just talked about in the MS4 program, as well as help us with our roadway excavation. There's more and more utilities in our roadways, along our roadways between high-speed fiber optics and things of that nature, that a lot of the excavation we do is hard to do traditionally, and you have to use hydro excavation in a lot of these areas in order to not hit utilities, cable lines, gas lines, all things of that nature that are intertwined with our infrastructure. So we had budgeted, and it's in the preliminary budget, for a new back truck for the highway department. It'll serve twofold, like I said, drainage, highway. It'll replace our current water truck that we go around and fill up our rollers and mills with water. So we have found one of those that is in stock. And the price for it is a little over $500,000. It's off the Sourcewell contract that allows us to purchase it without a separate bid. And then we would plan that we've discussed with Paul Adams in Finance is to utilize remaining money for a 6-wheel dump truck that we're trying to order right now for this year, which is right around $314,000. I have to confirm that number with Paul, which is why it says plus or minus. So utilize that money that we can't order the truck intended for it, and then transfer the balance out of the drainage fund. So we have the special drainage district, which does have its own fund that builds up. So the way we were proposing to purchase this truck that is on the ground that we can take delivery of as soon as we cut the PO is to pay for the little over $500,000 piece of equipment that was scheduled for next week. Do it now, utilize existing budget of $314,000, and then Paul has an organizational way to utilize about $187,000 of the special drainage district fund to pay for the balance of that, to take this truck that we can now, knowing there might be some time before we can order our traditional dump trucks in that portion of the budget. So that is my update on this situation.
So I find it quite ironic where the legislation was originally developed and implemented in California and was adopted in New York in 2021 with implementation in 2025. Seems to me that our downstate legislators forgot one thing that they prepared when they adopted this legislation that was initiated in California. It's called snow. So this could have a crushing blow on all municipalities in New York State. So it's good to see that, people are getting together, legislators, because this legislation really is going to have to change.
Yeah, there were some conversations with the town gates that spoke about making an exception. And the comment back to that was, this is not an exception. When you have 100% of the municipalities in New York State that are affected, it's not an exception. It needs to be a change in the rule. You know what I mean? That's what you just said, that everywhere in New York State plows snow. California is very limited, you know, so
Yeah.
it's a.
I had no idea about this, Pat, so I really appreciate you making this presentation to get the awareness out there.
Yeah, it's very.
It's really important that people in this state start calling their legislators and saying, you know, you need to take a look at this and reverse it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, it's
thank you
going to
for that.
affect.
There's a phenomenon known in sociology going way back out of my college days. It's called cultural lag. That's where the material culture outstrips the non-material culture. This is just the opposite. Here you have technology is not available, but you have political impetus to move ahead with programs that are really not realistic or functional. And it's just emphasize what John said. I mean, you have some, would you say it's interesting, it's California, New York, right? Of all the states that are pushing this, when the technology is really not there.
Not for these, you know, I think some of your different uses, buses, over-the-road things, there's starting to be technology that might be viable for those operations, but not for the municipality operations, which is, you know, it's just a key component of public safety.
No, it's
So that
it's
there's-
a point.
Yeah, there's areas that you can make some progress. And the other frustrating part that's in a lot of the documentation I've seen is that these diesel vehicles that we're using are 99% more clean than, you know, 10 years ago. So that the technology on the diesel use and the DEF and the different programs like that has come very long ways and is excellent. But it's still, you know, this doesn't address
Well,
that.
a clean and zero emissions technology is not necessarily the same.
No,
Actually, sadly, it's not.
No, you know, and
It's just another step.
I think the board knows, I don't know, maybe they don't, my brother Jeff owns a company called Wise Home Energy. And so they install commercially and residentially cold climate heat pumps, which is, you know, changing everything to electric in your house, you know, or whatever. And, you know, a lot of the things that they do, they get the incentives from New York State, NYSERDA and all that. And so he has a real, he's in the trenches on this thing. And he tells me all the time that there's no way that the grid, there's no plans to get to the grid to the point to handle all this.
Right.
And the story you told about the 2-hour charge when it was cold, he's told me dozens and dozens of stories. He's in the industry. He doesn't have anything against efficient electricity and all that stuff. I think rational people are like, hey, you know what? As time goes on, hey, we should make moves away from fossil fuels and this and that. But we should make moves away from it in a week, because there are things that need to be put into place. And we have a microcosm right here in Webster because, you know, we got Coke Fairlight going in, and Tessie bought all that land and buildings from Xerox. And one of the biggest problems is that RG&E, there's not enough power to handle all that. And they're still somewhat trying to figure out how to get that power to that area of town, just to power that industry that's going to be in there. So I don't know, but we know this, you know. And hey, unfortunately, Jenny, John, and myself, we're elected officials. That doesn't mean that we are experts on things. And sometimes, you know, the state assembly and the state, well, ideas have consequences. And it sounds great. And I think everybody would like cleaner energy and this and that. But if you go in and you put in, you vote it in, and now you say you got to have it in 10 years, now you start to whatever you just said in Latin.
Well, I know, it was English. Cultural lag, right?
Right, how do we get to that point?
But you know, and this is, and you mentioned this earlier, this is also an unfunded mandate, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
It really is.
Sure.
I mean, down the
I
road,
mean-
it's going to be, it's, you know.
Well, it's a perfect example of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
I don't want, if any, we don't have a lot of people in the room tonight, but maybe there's 1 million people watching live, and there'll be 10 million watchers on tape. I can only speak for myself, I'm not gonna speak for the other town board members. I'm not against electric and all of that stuff. What I'm against is not proper planning and foundationally making sure you can get to that point in the years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that you just voted on as a state assembly or whatever. Because that's, to me, it's irresponsible. So you either, like you said, John, you're educated people. Anybody that got elected, they're educated people. Go back, look at these realities, pull it back. Somebody's got to make the vote, the proposal, whatever, pull it back. And unfortunately, I think we just have such a polar in politics that it's like, oh yeah, because you're a big, coal guy and whatever. No, that's not what we're saying. It's just not going to be ready. I'll get off my soapbox. Jenny, do you have anything on this?
Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I don't know why we always copy California, following the laws there. We're in New York, we're New Yorker.
Ironically, there's, I think, Ford Motor Company and another car manufacturer are actually shutting down their manufacturing of electric vehicles because the sales are just not there anymore. I heard that in the news recently. They're losing tens of millions of dollars.
And also the cold too, we're draining a lot of the batteries.
Yeah.
Right, you can do it in the summer for a certain amount, but then in the winter, you can cut more than just half.
Yeah, between the cold and the
It's
equipment,
always, yeah.
the heavy equipment makes a big draw, so.
Well, the triumvirate, or whatever it's called there, Charlie, the last thing tonight, guess what? Pat Stevens,
Last one, I
our
promise.
esteemed highway superintendent. Status of the highway facility, project budget, and discussion on the potential to complete the salt bar replacement portion of the project. You're on that.
Thank you. Okay. So this is our first update on the project since it started last August. So I'm kind of excited to do this. A lot of interesting stuff in here, and then kind of at the tail end of it, we want to discuss, possible options of other things we can do now, given the stats we're at. We sort of discussed it when we came in to talk about it, when we were going through the budget review, approval, and adjustments, that this was a possibility that we would come back here, but we wanted to be farther along in the project before we proposed reincorporating some stuff into the budget. So the picture up here, I'll just say I took this yesterday morning. So we've now gone from a rendering of the building to this is what it actually looks like today. So it's pretty exciting to come along. It's been a schedule, so pretty happy with that. It looks very much like the picture. That's a real one of the rendering. So project update, the main building construction is about 75% complete. We're projected for substantial completion in January, completion of January of 2025. Lost my words. Which is about 3 to 4 months ahead of schedule. They're going to start doing some turnover in November, so this is actually a pretty conservative date. Hopefully we don't have any other issues being this far along in the completion. We shouldn't. The Cliff Jones upgrades, which is utilities and sprinklers, are about 95% complete. So those are the original components. The next few pieces I put together, what I tried to do so that people could go back and reference the original budgets was basically keep it in a very similar format to what we had before. So this is a very similar breakdown. The difference here is the way things were contracted is that the new building and Cliff Jones were done as one contract. So we had those broken out in the original proposal and budget. Now they're in one line item, one contract. What we have here is that we're currently contracted and on track for the new highway building and Cliffy Jones improvement to be $17,380,948. Our current projected incidentals, let's see if this works, which is significantly below what was originally budgeted, if we look at that item. Project incidentals, let's just skip it. They're at projected at 3.8 million, which is actually slightly higher than what we had originally projected. The two key components to that is there was lifts for the internal building purchased off of state contract, which we didn't have broken out in a separate line item, so in order to incorporate them and compare apples to apples, I put them in here. The other portion that ran slightly higher on that was the utility coordination. We had to relocate, I think, 5 different companies on a set of wires that ran through the middle of where the building is, and each of them had a relocation fee to move those wires around to get to the cell tower in the back, and that ended up being a little bit more than we had anticipated. So that's why those are the 2 main reasons that incidental number is slightly higher than we originally projected. At this point in the project, we're keeping a contingency, but it's not nearly as big as it was originally because of the percentage that we are complete. There's just less risk to the finish. This number is pretty conservative though, based on what we have left and what could go wrong. So that's what we're currently holding for contingency. As you can see, that total there is significantly lower than we originally projected. We approved a bond amount for the project based on what these numbers were originally is $28,250,000. But right now, we believe we're going to come in right around the $21,629,000 range, which is basically $6,620,367 under the bonded amount.
Yeah, before you move on to the next slide, I just was wondering if you could explain to those who may not be aware, what is exactly is project incidentals and also project contingency?
Yep. So project incidentals are costs that we know we're going to incur, but they're not related to the asset, to the construction of the building. So they're things like engineering, furniture purchases, equipment purchases, things of that nature, paying our genie for the new gas service, paying Monroe Water Authority for the gas. It's like $15,000 for them to tap the line. So it's sort of fees, legal fees that might come in. We had some insurances that we picked up at a certain point for once the building was up in that. The term that might be used would be soft cost, things of that nature, right. But then in combination with some actual equipment and our furniture budgets in there. So that's the incidental budget. So our construction oversight from campus management is in there, and our design for MRB, which were the 2 biggest part of that. They represent almost 3/4 of this amount. So our design, engineering, and construction oversight are in that. Contingency is essentially typically a percentage of the project that is held for unforeseens. Right. So these are the costs that you can't see. You know, all those things I just mentioned, you know that they're there, they're possible, they're tangible enough to put a number to. Contingency is for the things that aren't tangible, the things that are hidden, the things that can't be found. You know, this was originally 1.2 million, a little over 1.2 million, which was 5% of the project. Now that we're this far along and complete, we haven't had to eat into that in a drastic way. So we've adjusted this.
So what happens to that $425,000 if you do not use any more of it?
Then we never borrow against it, right? So it doesn't get spent. That's how we ended up this far under, is by not spending the allowable amount, and that's pretty much been my goal since we started. I spend a lot of time on it, try to really watch every little thing we can do and self-perform. We've had a few things where we got a price on something that had to be adjusted, and it was something that we could complete ourselves, so we didn't, add that cost in there. So yeah, at the end of the day, what we thought we might have to bond or borrow $28 million on, we won't be borrowing that amount. So that debt won't go against the town or the taxpayers. It'll be dramatically less.
Yeah, right. That's all.
Okay, is that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt your question.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure I answered it.
No, you didn't.
Okay. So at this time, given that budget update, we wanted to revisit the scope. So our current scope covers the large building, the 82,000 square foot building that has truck parking, maintenance bays, staff facilities, and office space, as well as the Cliff Jones upgrade, which includes spring sprinklers in the entire building, which is huge for that roughly $3 million asset to not have sprinklers. It was very unfortunate, so we were able to correct that. So what we want to revisit is the original scope, the February 9th, 2023 presentation for what was needed at the facility included replacement of the existing salt barn. It was removed to ensure that the bid package, was as minimal as possible, and that for budget protection was the only reason the salt barn replacement was removed prior to bid. The salt barn is 40 years old. It was built in the 80s. It's approaching the end of its useful life. The new barn would be built out of more corrosion-resistant materials. It would be slightly larger to hold some additional salt, which reflects the growth of the town since the 80s when the other building was built. And the existing barn, given it does have some useful life left, and it's not completely gone, we would keep it and reutilize it for dry storage, like topsoil, which is huge. In the spring of the year, when we're doing lawn repairs and different stuff like that, have some dry materials that aren't affected by the weather would be big. So we do plan to continue to use the existing building until it has fully used its lifespan, and it needs to be torn down, which we hope is a few more years, but we're not sure exactly how long, but not that long. And then, so we want to discuss the additional, one additional scope item as well. Recently, I mentioned earlier that EPA audit that we had. It was noted by the EPA agents that our current practice of wrenching out the large debris and dirt out of the back of the trucks on the yard and having it sort of flow directly into the drainage ditch could use improvement. Along with that, we do a lot of washing out of salt in the back of the trucks in the wintertime, which is extremely cold when we do it outside. So we have looked at a smaller building where we could house some of the hoses and different things to do the heavy debris washout of the trucks in a small enclosed building. We want to consider adding that now, given where we stand with the budget. So we'll get into the specifics of those a little bit more as I move along here. So the proposed scope and improvements that are involved with the salt barn are kind of depicted here in the site plan. The salt barn would be wood framed with a steel lean-to structure, have concrete push walls along the bottom. Currently they're wood. We would switch them to concrete, which are more resistant. There'd be improved lighting, improved functionality given the location and orientation of the building, increased storage capacity, and then updated utilities, be it drainage, things of that nature. The truck washout building, so that the proposed location for the new salt barn is actually in the footprint of the existing building, which is scheduled for demo anyway at a certain point because it is past its useful life, or very much at the end of it. So that footprint there allows the existing salt barn to stay to the upper right hand, and the footprint of the new salt barn, which does have the lean-tos all the way on three sides of it, is over the rear end of the existing main building. They're kind of in the middle of the site. The new truck washout we would have kind of in line with as you're heading to the entrance for the new building. That's all the way at the bottom of the screen there. So you'd be able to pass through that, get the big debris out of your truck, and then go enter in the building where you would do the traditional washing at the end of each shift. Having that building would improve water quality. It would allow us to treat the water, be more compliant with our MS4. It would be more efficient washout. We would have some stairs in there and different things where the safety of it could be improved. Sometimes there's still times where we're getting up on ladders and things to spray off the top of the truck. This could have those areas incorporated into it. Improve winter operations, and then reduce maintenance and plumbing inside the building. So we do have wash bays inside the building, but if we were to utilize those for the heavy debris, like the dirt that's in the back of the truck, they would clog up, fill up much faster. We'd be sending more water down the sewer. So those would be improvements associated with the truck washout building as well. We have preliminary budgets on these. We haven't had our construction manager do full estimates. This quantity or dollar value for the salt barn here is what was used in the earlier presentations that was eliminated to try to help us stay under budget. That's 1.7 million estimated. The truck washout, we haven't gone through design yet because it's been kind of a new thought of an improvement that we'd like to do to improve the facility. We've got that in there estimated at 750,000, and then if we're looking at the total budget that we would want to use, we would have an incidental line in there for fees associated with the building, much like I described earlier. So it's estimated currently at approximately $2.7 million to reincorporate these portions and add the truck washout building. The picture there is a picture of the locker room, which is actually pretty cool. It's one of the features that has gotten installed in the existing building now that everybody's really excited about. The larger lockers for the guys' gear, they're 2x2. They add a coffee color to the room, so that's the current locker room in the main building that we're heading to begin construction on. So,
Did you just go back one slide, please?
yeah. Which, back one more, or?
No, that's good.
Okay.
So the original estimate for the salt barn, when was that done?
So that was back at the start of this construction, would have been summer last year when we were getting ready to bid.
So that's probably still a pretty good.
Yeah, it's not way off. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of things have normalized a little bit, have been
Yeah.
a lot more flat in the last 12 months than they were in the construction industry the past 2 years, where they were jumping, large percentages annually. We haven't seen that as much this year, so I don't think it's far off, but obviously we want to put it through the rest of our consultants to make sure before we do anything. This is just to sort of get a feel for if it's feasible to do this undertaking now, then we would be coming back, with any adjusted different things to make final decisions on whether or not it moves forward.
Yeah. So you don't have, do you have rough drawings for the truck washout building or incidentals?
Not for the truck, and then the incidentals I haven't pulled. It's more of a percentage, it's almost like a contingency at this
Yeah.
point. The truck wash we have not begun to design just because it really became apparent of the need more recently in June when we had the audit. So I haven't done anything on that, but the salt barn itself is 95% designed. We included that in the design package for the main building because it was in the original scope. So the design on that building is just needs tune-up. So that's designed in good shape, not so much for the truck washing. So the benefits to the contract now, which is why I'm presenting it now, is that the cost of labor and materials is always increasing. Each year that goes by, it will go up. I just said it didn't go up very much this past year, but over the course of 5 or 10 years, it will continue to go up inevitably. That there's no doubt about that. So therefore, this is the cheapest time to ever do it. It will cost more in the future. Construction management efficiency. So we currently have construction oversight contracts with campus and with MRB. If the timing of this was to work out where we could bid it over the winter, which is a great time to bid, we wouldn't have to add on to those professional services contracts. They would be able to, because we're finishing early, because we're 4 months ahead of schedule, they basically said that they would stay on or segment the months that they had accounted for in the price
That's
to
fantastic.
cover this, which could be considerable.
And so that construction is under Wick's law, it's not under energy performance, correct?
Oh, no, yeah, this is all.
I know energy performance gets paid on a percentage of the overall project.
Absolutely not. No, every single one of these is bid. The professional services, we try to get 3 or 4 prices because we don't have to do the formal bid. But everything on this project, we chose to go with a traditional bid.
And I totally agree, if they're gonna, do it at no cost or minimal cost, they're still on site, they don't have to remobilize, and they, I would assume, could use some of the same contractors that are working there currently, so they don't have to remobilize. So I concur.
Yeah, there's a lot of efficiencies. They've indicated that. Number 4 here is exactly what you just said, motivated contractors from the current project. Right, so somebody's there, you know how they're gonna bid that. I think we could have some very competitive bid numbers if the people that are already on site are interested. There's efficiencies for them, right? Very real ones.
Absolutely.
So then site layout, timing, we have a very clean cut site where there's a lot of knowns, not a lot of unknowns, which makes for very competitive bidding, which is what we saw from the budget update, that we were able to capture a lot at bid time.
I think campus has done a great job out there along with your team.
Yeah.
And the numbers reflect that.
Right.
They really do.
Right, yeah, and we've really put a big emphasis on the numbers because we know it's a difficult time right now. So that's why we've got this. So the final effect of what I'm proposing or putting forth here tonight, obviously if we take the total for the current contract price, which includes the incidentals and the contingency, and then we incorporate the salt barn, the truck washout, and the incidentals that are currently accounted for that, we think that the total expense would be right around $24 million, $24,350. If that's the case, then we would still be able to turn the project back in without utilizing the $28,250,000. We would still be tracking or projecting right now to be $3,899,000 underneath that bond approval after completing this component. So we'd like to do next steps on this. We kind of already talked about it a little bit, but based on the status of each of the components that I just mentioned, the salt barn, we would need to enter a professional services contract to finalize the design because it's already mostly complete, and then develop the bid documents. We'd have to advertise for bid, and then award and construct. For the truck washout, because it is a new piece to the puzzle, there'd be some minor adjustments. We'd have to go out with professional services to get the design of the building and create bid docs. We would have to amend the current bond language to incorporate the talk of an exterior wash bay building, and then there'd be a minor seeker amendment. The seeker amendment wouldn't change the effectiveness of the project, 'cause it's on the same footprint. It's over an existing building, so it would have no material changes in what was happening. The bond amount really is language, not dollars changed. And then we'd have to bid and construct it. And that is the current rendering of the proposed barn. It's very similar style to what we have now. Like I said, just updated, given the other one's 40 years old. So questions and comments that are overlaid on that is the current interior of the building. Standing on the mezzanine in the maintenance bay, starting to see the floor pours going in the parking stalls facing east. So it's exciting.
It's impressive. The picture doesn't tell the whole story though. I mean,
No.
you really need to walk in there to see the magnitude of that building.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to getting done, and then I think we're gonna do another round of tours to,
Yeah.
open it up to the public, get some people to go through it and really check it out. It's awesome.
So, I had a kind of a funny story that happened in the last week, and Pat, I think you know about it too. A guy by the name of Barry Dean, maybe a lot of you guys know him, he worked for the town for 50 years, town board member for 12 years, was the highway superintendent, I think, for 15 years. Barry's a great guy, he has a bat phone to me. When he calls, I answer. I respect my elders. And he called me, and he said, what is this thing, this salt barn and whatever, what's going on there? And I said, well, Barry, because he's skeptical and all that. I said, you know what you should do? You should go see Pat. Go get a tour of the place, talk to Pat. So did he take you up on that, Pat?
We did. Met up and took a walk with him
I think it was last
last week.
Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday afternoon.
And then about an hour after he took that tour with you and he asked you a bunch of questions about this, he called me and he said, you should definitely go forward with that salt barn and that wash station. I said, well, I'm glad to hear that, Barry. For all the reasons that,
Right.
so that Pat gave. The good news is that this is a bid thing. If we proceed on, if we give the blessing for these next steps, if the bids come in higher than what we have an appetite for, then we don't accept the bids and we don't move forward with it. I think, Charlie, we can do that, right?
Sure.
I mean, I would hope we don't have to do that, but if the bids come in a lot higher than what we thought they were, and the board decides not to accept them, then.
Well, and that'll have a more accurate projections of the costs as, they move forward with the drawings. And that, Charles, the question goes to you, to allow Patrick to move ahead with the engineering drawings and what's required. We can put that in a resolution, I would assume, or not?
Well, yeah, but you're talking about keeping it within the same ambit of expenses. Is that what you would approve?
Yeah, so we wouldn't have to increase the bond amount.
Yeah,
We would
that's
have
what
to
I
come
mean.
into
That's what I
award the
mean.
contract. So
Yeah.
we would do professional services, we'd get prices for the engineering.
Gotcha.
That would be the only thing we'd have to expend.
Well, no, there's a new contract, yes, but you've already
Well, there's,
crossed
I'm
it.
gonna
No,
guess
for
there's some
this
resolution on
change in
October 3rd.
scope, my question is
Yeah.
to allow Pat to go out and get these drawings and get some, so they have more accurate prices. We need to pass a resolution to that effect because
It's a great question.
but it's still under the bond amount.
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
yes,
my
oh, yeah,
question.
of course.
And I think that would be October 3rd.
Yeah, that was the
Now
idea,
it's
is depending on the
details.
feedback tonight, we could come October 3rd with
Yeah.
that.
Right.
component. Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Yeah.